Local stories, local people. We're taking you inside Western Mass news. It's the Even Better Western Mass podcast with Dave Madsen.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Wherever you are, I hope you're doing well. And as we speak, kids are heading back to school. Some are in class. Some are working remotely from at home. Others are doing a combination of both of those things, all because of the continuing threat, of course, of COVID-19. You know, you think about it, it's been about 7 months now since anything has been normal around here, across the country and across the world, too. Many more people are continuing to work from home, too. Whether it's school or work, though, our computers are more at risk for cyber attacks. As you'll learn today, it's not a question of if you'll be a victim of a cyber attack, but when. My guest is Delcie Bean. He's the CEO of Paragus, an IT service firm based in Hadley. Delcie and I talk about the cyber threats to you, whether you're working or doing schoolwork from home, and the best strategies to keep from becoming a victim. Delcie, thanks for being with me on Even Better Western Mass, and we're going to talk about exactly what you and I are doing right now, working remotely and doing an interview remotely. More and more people are doing it. It's really the way of the future. And as we look at schools this year, it's the same thing. Many children are either doing learning from home partly or completely. Let's talk about working remotely from home or school and the dangers associated with it as far as being hacked.
Yeah, it's an important conversation. I think that there's two different angles to it. There's the kind of consumer approach, what you, your family, your kids should be doing. And then there's the business approach. What steps does a business need to take to have its workforce work remotely, but do so in a secure way? Starting out with just kind of the basic stuff, making sure that your computer has the right protection. I think a lot of us probably haven't used our laptop in a while. A lot of us have converted over to things like iPads and other devices and found that we were dusting off the old computer that we had kind of started to stop using. If that's the case, it's also possible that machine maybe doesn't have up-to-date antivirus, maybe it hasn't had Windows updates installed in a very long time. So there's kind of a basic etiquette of just making sure that the devices, the technology you're using are maintained, up-to-date, patched, and are taken care of. I think that's kind of fundamentally step number one. Beyond that, I think another thing that that individuals need to be very careful of is just understand there's a lot of predators out there really taking advantage of this opportunity, and that's how they see it. They're doing a lot of, it's mainly phishing attacks, campaigns that are going to come in through either email or vishing, which comes in through the phone. You might also get a text message campaign. And they're taking advantage of the stimulus payments, saying something like, there's a new stimulus payment available. You need to click here to verify your banking information. That one was incredibly successful. There's people sending out emails that have a PowerPoint attached that say, learn the latest facts about COVID. That can be a very tempting PowerPoint to open up, but it could also be embedded with a virus or some sort of other negative aspect on it. And then also, there's just a lot of people who are always out there preying on the vulnerable, who now feel like people's heightened sense of insecurity or fear is higher, and therefore they're more vulnerable. And so we're seeing just a higher volume of the attacks that we would have normally seen just happening even more and more often. Everything from the call saying, I'm from Dell, you need to remotely connect into your computer, or from Microsoft, your software's expired, I need to connect with you. Those kinds of attacks are at an all-time high.
Maybe part of this too is to better understand these people who are doing this. This is stuff that they're doing on a full-time basis. And what do they get out of this? I mean, do they make, in some instances, obviously they make money out of it, but more often than not, is it just to screw things up for people?
No, that was true maybe 10, 15 years ago, where it might have been a kid in a basement trying to just do something to see if he could get, how far he would get to see if he made the newspaper. We're way beyond that. These are very, very professional organizations. They're big corporations. There are, in some cases, dozens, if not hundreds of employees working for the same company. The employees show up like a job for work, punch in, do a task, have a department. You've got a marketing department, you've got an attack department, you've got a vector department, a payment department. It runs like a big corporation. And some of these companies are making hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue that they're generating by the activities that are being conducted by these attacks. So it's very professionalized, it's very organized, it's very mature, it's very sophisticated. It's no longer that kind of kid in the basement who's just causing trouble.
It's one of those things too. They're a heck of a lot smarter than the average computer user at home as far as trying to really dupe you out of your money.
They're not only smarter, but they're constantly evolving and changing. They have entire departments dedicated to R&D who are always doing research to figure out better technologies. They do a lot of what marketing calls A/B testing, where they'll send 2 different email campaigns and see which one gets the better response, and then they'll send more of the one that got the better response. They're also constantly evolving and learning what are other legitimate activities that are happening. So what does an email from UPS look like telling you that your package was delayed, and how can they mimic that? What does your Capital One e-statement look like, and how can they mimic that? So they're doing a very good job of not just doing their own content creation, but learning from other content and adapting it and modifying it to be malicious.
Yeah, I got something like that. Actually, I've gotten a couple of them from Netflix saying, "Oh, my credit card is expired," even though I know the basic thing with those is if you get one of those notices, is go to the actual account itself and double check there, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of fundamental good tricks with email. The first is if you hover over the link, most email programs will tell you where that link is actually going to take you. What you're looking for is the domain name of the company. So for example, if it's a Capital One notice and CapitalOne.com does not appear in that URL that they're sending me to, you automatically know off the bat that's a bad thing, don't click on it. If you're ever unsure, your suggestion is exactly right. Close the email, open up your web browser, go to that company's website, log in legitimately using what you know, and see if that notice or that message is there anywhere, or if there's anything action to take from that perspective. That'll also often alleviate the risk.
I guess we get in the habit too, when we get these emails, we just automatically open them, and we really can't do that anymore. We've got to be a lot more careful as we go through things day in and day out, right?
Yeah, you really do have to have a certain level of scrutiny where you have to assume some significant portion of the email or the messaging coming to you does have a malicious intent. And another example is as simple as there's a company or hacking organization that was buying ads on Amazon. And what they were doing was they were taking a legitimate JCPenney ad, a content for a free coat with a certain purchase, taking that legitimate ad, then paying Amazon to run that ad on Amazon.com when you were searching for coats. But when you clicked on the link to go to the ad, instead of bringing you to JCPenney's website and offering you a promotion, it was bringing you to an illegitimate site that was collecting information about you. So even the way that we interact with the internet in terms of clicking on things on a website search, and even a website that we think of as legitimate like Amazon, you still need to operate with a certain level of scrutiny that if you're leaving that website, the domain that you know, and the domain is always the way to go. So up at that address bar, if you're no longer on Amazon.com, your level of fear needs to go up in terms of you got to just kind of increase that level of scrutiny. And there are products that can help. There's WebSense and other tools that monitor your web traffic and give you feedback on whether the site is safe or not. And again, just having really good antivirus is a good starting point for residential and home users.
And I suppose too, with all of us, we've just got to assume that, people are out there looking to try to take advantage of us, and somewhere along the way, it's going to happen if we're not careful.
Well, even if you are careful, the reality is that 80% of businesses will get hacked, and that number goes up every year. The estimation is now almost at 100%. So your organization, if you're a business owner or an employee in a business, there is a very, very high probability, almost a certainty, that that business will be compromised at some point. As individual users, it's probably somewhere in the 50% range. You're going to fall for something, you're going to click on something, or by no means of your own, your information is going to be stolen by some legitimate activity you did because that company was hacked. And we obviously have seen that in a lot of the big ones, the Target, the Home Depot, the credit union, when those kinds of things happen, be doing anything wrong.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it now. All right, all of a sudden I'm working from at home. Now, I'm sure there are precautions that these companies are taking too, but beyond that, we as individuals at home, what precautions do we have to take within our own computers and, say, our own Wi-Fi setup at the house?
Well, so that's actually a good point, is I don't think a lot of businesses were forced very quickly to convert a significant number of their employees to remote employees in a very, very short period of time. And so that assumption that many businesses are doing things securely and doing things to protect themselves isn't always true. And that was a lot due to the nature of just how quickly we all had to make this transition. It was a very reactionary choice as opposed to something that was well thought out and deliberate. So there are a lot of security vulnerabilities that the business needs to look at and address. As the home user, the couple of key problems are, if you're using residential Wi-Fi that's provided to you by, let's say, your cable provider, there's an inherent amount of risk within that. If you use or your spouse use or other people are using to then make that connection over that unsecure Wi-Fi back to your company's network, you're introducing a significant amount of risk and vulnerability, not only to yourself, but into your business's environment, because there's a lot of unsecure points there. Really, if working from home is going to be a permanent thing, there's a couple of things that should happen. First, the machine that you're using to do that working from home really should be a dedicated working computer. It should be a machine that is not shared with your family, but is a machine that you use to do work. Ideally, not even the machine that you use in your free time to do personal activities, but is purely just your work computer. Second, ideally, if that machine is going to be using Wi-Fi, it should be using a different Wi-Fi than all the other devices in your home. Not the one that your kids have, not the ones your neighbors sometimes borrow. It should be a dedicated Wi-Fi just for that working from home purpose. And then there's two things that you can do to create a secure network. Either using a technology called VPN, Virtual Private Network, which has been around for a very long time, and that creates a tunnel between your network at home and your company that is very secure and doesn't allow hackers to get in between, or literally buying a dedicated router that is going to connect back to your company's work and that your computer or your Wi-Fi is plugged into that dedicated router, not the router that the rest of your family is using. And you can chain that router underneath your cable internet, so you don't have to buy two different internet connections, but you can have two routers. One router can just be for the work stuff and one router for all the home stuff. And if people are going to work from home in the long run, that's really the only way to do so that is going to be really secure and ensure that privacy doesn't get breached.
This apply to students at home too? Same thing, having a dedicated computer and breaking it down the same way?
I think students don't have to go quite that far. Students really have to think about what is it that they're interacting with and what is it that could be breached or is vulnerable. So the difference is, in a business environment, we're often dealing with confidential data that we don't want to get out there. And we have a responsibility to be stewards of that data and to make sure that it is protected. In most college environments, the students don't have access to anything super confidential or super proprietary. So they should be concerned more about their own safety in terms of making sure that they're taking care of their computer. It's got good antivirus, it's got good protection, that it has a good firewall, and that you're making sure that you're not risking your own privacy, but you're probably not jeopardizing other people's privacy the way that many people who work from home could have an opportunity to do. They could accidentally cause a breach for other people's data.
And that's the thing I think we have to think about too, is that if our data is breached at our home, the dangers it could, as far as it could really create for other people along the line with that company, right?
Well, that's exactly right. If somebody hacks your computer or you click on the wrong email and they get your email password, they can then log into your email and start emailing your coworkers from you, asking them to do something. Now, those coworkers might trust that email because it comes from somebody they know. So they do the thing that you asked them to do in that email, and suddenly half of your company has been breached because you clicked on an email you shouldn't have clicked on a computer you probably shouldn't have been using to do home-related stuff. It should have been dedicated for work. And that's the cascading effect that we're seeing, where suddenly that company has a ransom note for $5 million hanging over its head, that if they want to continue to operate and have access to their business, they have to pay some hacker $5 million to regain access to their own data.
Let's talk about those hackers too. And then you're hearing more and more about this, where this whole thing about ransom, basically shutting down whole companies until they pay something.
It's been going on for a long time, but it's becoming a lot more prevalent, and it's also going after smaller and smaller targets. So in the news recently, you've seen companies as big as Garmin get approached by attacks like this. But what we see almost on a monthly basis is small businesses in the Western Mass community getting hit with these types of attacks, where they come into work on Monday morning, there's a notice on their computer that says, your network has been hacked. If you want access to your data, transfer this many Bitcoins to this wallet. And until that happens, you have no access to your computer system.
That in itself is just absolutely frightening how easy it is. But I suppose with all of us, we're all opening our lives up on our computers and to pay our bills or whatever else, and even taking it to another level when you're a business. And like you said, that so many of these businesses were forced to do this over a period of 10 days to 2 weeks, to go online to be able to do business. And while there are some good aspects to it, is there more good that outweighs bad as far as doing that, you think?
Working remotely?
Working remotely and more and more companies doing their business online.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to basically accept the fact that computers are going to be the foundation of our businesses. They're going to touch everything we do, from our digital marketing to how we interact with our customers, to how we manage our money, to how we analyze the effectiveness of our business itself. Everything these days is going to be based on a computerized network of some form. And as AI and other forms of technology continue to advance, it's even going to take the place of what used to be people doing work and tasks and jobs. It's going to be as important as your workforce in some cases. It will be part of your workforce in other cases. And so you can't remove the technology. In terms of how you secure it, you have to take a very strategic approach about first assessing where's our biggest vulnerabilities. Typically, it's going to be the employees themselves. And then where are those employees? Are they working in an office? Are they working remotely? What technology are they using to work? And how do we secure that technology and the way they access it to make sure that they don't become vulnerable targets to take down the rest of the network and potentially the business, but also then the data that we have as a business that then further hurts even more people, because now social security numbers or bank account information of our employees and our customers and our vendors have now been compromised. And it becomes about even more than just our own business.
We talk about protecting our own computers, with any kind of, one of the things now, I mostly use Macs, and along the lines, we've also heard that, well, you don't have to worry about Macs. They're not vulnerable to attacks, but that's not the case, is it?
No, it's a common misconception. And I will say that while we don't see as many Mac viruses as we do PCs, they tend to be more effective when they do happen. And a lot of it is there's no antivirus because there's this sense of security. I'm using a Mac, I don't have to worry about it. Or the antivirus isn't well maintained or updated for basically the same reason. I think Mac users also feel a little bit invincible or a little bit less vulnerable. And so they might feel more comfortable clicking on a link or doing something because they feel this sense of security because they are using a Mac product. And that just unfortunately isn't true anymore. And now the iOS operating system, which has forever been looked at as one that was very hard to crack, has now started to see some compromises. So your iPhone, your Android, your Mac, your desktop, your Windows, an electronic device, even your thermostat in your home, Nest thermostats have been hacked. If you have technology, you have to assume that there's a risk associated with owning and using that technology. And the first step is to be educated about what are those risks? What is the worst thing that could happen? And what can I do to help protect myself? You can't rip the technology out. We can't live in a world without it. We don't want to live in a world without it. It's helping us in so many ways. Not only are Macs vulnerable, and there is a risk there, because as technology continues to increase, there definitely is new and better ways to hack even devices like Macs. You got to be very careful about the false sense of security that a lot of people often have, because they don't think they can be hacked, and therefore they feel more brazen about clicking on links or doing things they otherwise would have done. We're now also seeing those attacks spread into things like the iPhone iOS operating system, which for a long time was thought of as very hard to hack. We're now seeing hacks present there. And so whether you have an iPhone, an Android, a Mac, Windows, a Chromebook, a tablet, or even a thermostat that is electronic in your house and connected to your Wi-Fi, you have to assume that there's some level of risk associated with owning electronic devices. And I don't think the answer is to rip all those electronics out of your life, because they're there to help us. And in so many ways, they have helped us. But we do need to be informed consumers that if we're going to use technology to help ourselves, we need to know what are the risks with that. And we need to do the best job we can of protecting ourselves against those risks from having negative consequences.
Now, when we do that, should we be checking our computers daily as far as our cybersecurity is concerned, and how we're protecting ourselves against viruses? Something we do once a week. Obviously, it's something we got to keep track of.
Yeah, as a consumer for your home computer, having really good antivirus that you're sure is working, that you can see little icon in the bottom corner and it hasn't turned red or done anything too flashy, making sure that that subscription is being renewed. That's step number one. It's a good starting point. Most of those products will also include a firewall, making sure that that firewall is turned on. Then you think about things like your Wi-Fi. Do I have a password? Do I ever change that password? Maybe thinking about changing that once a year or so. Beyond that, it's really about how you interact with the technology. Am I clicking on links? Am I not clicking on links? Am I paying close attention? And then furthermore, you could go one step further for signing up for some sort of a monitoring service that's going to monitor things like your credit score, your rating, and make sure that if somebody did get a hold of your social security number, your driver's license number, that you would be notified and aware that that was happening. And there's a lot of services out there now that you can sign up for $30 a year, $40 a year, that will provide that kind of monitoring for you and alert you the second something strange is happening.
I guess that's nothing worse as far as spending money on homeowners insurance or insurance for our cars.
It's similar to insurance, and it's even one step further because it's a little bit like having an alarm system in your house. You're going to know that somebody broke through the window and stole something. But in the cyber world, oftentimes the hacker can get away without anybody seeing that. Some of these monitoring services, while they're not going to necessarily catch the hacker in the act, they're definitely going to let you know that the hack that you may not have been aware of even happened did happen. And while they're not going to solve that problem for you, they will let you then take the actions you need to start to solve that.
All right, we've talked a lot about that. Let's talk about your company, a little bit about yourself, how you got into this business to begin with, and I also want to stretch this out to the point that how you're helping others get into the business that you are in.
Sure. So I started this company back when I was in high school, and back then it was a very different company. We actually focused almost exclusively on serving residential consumers. We helped a lot of the senior citizens who were getting their first computer sign up for an email address or install their printer or learn how to interact with Microsoft Office. We did that for many years until we became more focused on business market. We rebranded the company at that point as Paragus. Since 2011, our entire focus has been on serving the small business community of Western Massachusetts. So we work with the private medical offices, we work with the insurance brokers, we work with manufacturing companies, and we work with the nonprofits to help make sure that their IT is being taken care of, from helping their employees to managing their security and their compliance, to helping them think through the strategy of IT, which technology, how do I do work? How do I handle my migration to the cloud? Some of these big questions that are really hard to answer without a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge about what's going on in all the different marketplaces.
It really does. I mean, it's mind-boggling when you think of all these things. It's like, oh yes, we're talking about the cloud, and there is a certain generation. I guess I'm part of it. Although having worked with computers more at work and at home, it's like, so all my stuff goes up in a cloud. It can be overwhelming, can't it?
It can, and there's still a lot of businesses that have a single IT person on their staff that they just expect to know everything and do everything and be the expert, and that just, it isn't practical anymore. The companies that have outsourced IT to firms like ours have realized that there's a lot of aspects to technology. Similar to accounting, you've got your taxes, but you also have your financial strategy, you also have your bookkeeping and your cash management. There's a lot to it, and it's even much more complicated than accounting. And so having a team of people who are looking at all of those different things, asking you all the right questions, because I think that's the number one thing is business owners don't know what they don't know. They don't even know what questions they should be asking in many cases. And so it's about having an advisor who's going to come to you and say, here's 5 things that need to be on your radar. Here's a couple of strategies we should be talking about, and asking you the questions of, are you comfortable having all your data in the cloud? Or how much downtime could your business survive before it lost a significant amount of revenue? Those types of questions are really important for business owners to be thinking about. And oftentimes they don't even know what those questions are to ask.
Sure. And I'm guessing too, we've gone beyond the, okay, you employee A over here, you're going to take care of all of our IT stuff. A couple of computers and this and that. We're way beyond that now, aren't we?
Yeah, and unfortunately, some businesses, that is still their approach, and they're very vulnerable as a result, because no matter how wonderful that person is, or amazing or intelligent, and I've met some amazing, very intelligent people, it's just too much to keep track of and to manage. And so there's going to be something that gets left behind, some vulnerability. And unfortunately, it's terrible, because that business will then be the victim of an attack, and it'll get blamed on that one person who really wasn't set up to succeed. They need a partner who's going to help them cover the things that they can't cover, so that they can focus on things that they do have time for, that they are good at, that they are well suited for.
And there are very few businesses out there now that don't have some kind of internet or web presence. That this is just it's who we are and what we do now.
Yeah, and especially with COVID, I think the fact that so many employees had to work remotely and deal with that transition. I know a lot of organizations are trying to figure out how to accept payments electronically now because they don't want to physically cash checks anymore. There's so much about this pandemic that has actually influenced the technology and how we use it. I mean, even the fact that Zoom has become a significant portion of our lives and other types of video conferences, that might not have been true as simple as 6 months ago. The need and dependency has increased so significantly, but therefore, as does need to be the security and the strategy and the thinking around it.
I know you talk about Zoom, what we're using here too. I understand, like on Monday, I know at UMass, they started classes again on Monday, but Zoom was down for about 5 hours. These systems are becoming overwhelmed. I mean, we knew that Zoom was out there before, but now it's just part of our everyday life.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that you need to think about when you're coming up with your strategies is if my business is 100% dependent on a virtual meeting happening at a certain date and time, and I can't tolerate downtime, I may need to have a backup provider. Microsoft Teams is very quickly becoming that alternative provider. There's, of course, many, many others. But most businesses need to think about, we have a backup meeting link. And if this link doesn't work, you immediately transition over to this and we get right back into business and we don't miss a beat. That's the level of thinking that, again, we wouldn't even thought of 6 months ago that we now need to put a lot of time and energy into.
It is amazing too, when you alluded to this, the fact that really over a period of a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, how many businesses change their whole business plan because of COVID-19. It does prove one thing, that we can change things when we can, but then as you're talking, we have to take a step back and look at what we did, make sure it's the right thing for us and that we're protected.
That's exactly right. I mean, our staff, just for the 110 clients that we provide, we worked for 4 days straight around the clock, probably moving close to 400 people to be remote workers in a 3-day span of time after the governor made his announcement. We didn't have a lot of time to think strategically. It was a very reactive decision. But then 2 months later, when it became clear that the working from home was not going to be a short-term solution, we reached back out to each of our clients and had a strategic conversation to talk about, for your business and your employees and your design, we need to rethink the way we built your remote setup. Here's the best way that you should be doing it, and how can we transition your workforce to be using that methodology? And that needs to be a little bit of a case by case. It's not a one size fits all. Every business is a little bit different, but that conversation has to happen, and it needs to be intentional and thought through and strategic, so it isn't just the reactionary quick fix.
And your company, I'm sure, as far as, a company going out and say, okay, we're going to buy this, 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 and this, and spend a lot of money on this, you've got to be careful about what you're spending your money on. And that's where you come in. I would, partly what you do.
Yeah, a lot of these technology decisions are significant investments. The investments of cost, change management aspect, which may be the most cost expensive, trying to get employees to learn to do something a new way, trying to get everybody aligned around doing something a new way. An organization only has so much tolerance for that. And then there's all the time and energy that goes into actually implementing it and training everybody and getting everybody up to speed. When you think about all of the cost and complexity around that, you don't want to make these decisions lightly. You want to be very thoughtful and diligent about how you make those decisions. And a lot of times business owners just don't have the experience or the breadth of knowledge to even be able to go down that road, or to even know what are the options that they should be considering. So we partner with our clients to first ask them the right questions to figure out what their needs are, then present them with a few solutions, talk about the pros and cons, help them make a decision about which solution they believe to be the right one, and then help coach them through the entire implementation, training, change management, investment side. And then honestly, some of the most important work happens after the fact on the maintenance and monitoring and making sure the solution truly was rolled out and implemented. A lot of times a solution gets implemented, but they never use more than the first 10% of the features because they just moved on to the next thing. Really want to get the capital investment out of that and make sure you use the whole product.
I just like it, and I refer to cars in the same sort of way. If you buy a car and you're spending, tens of thousands of dollars on a car, you want to make sure you take it to the Mercedes mechanic, if that's what you're driving, to make sure it's done well, not to the guy in the corner. Not that they're bad, but they don't see that many Mercedes. And I would guess that would be the same thing with your computer systems too, that yes, you're working with them, but when something goes wrong, it can really go wrong very quickly, and you need to act on it fast.
Very true. And a lot of the things that you use are not actually the vulnerabilities. It's a lot of the stuff that's behind the scenes, how the backups exactly work, how the database is secured, how the engine behind the front end actually is working is the part that we have to be concerned about. And I think one of the things that makes us a little bit unique is that we are an employee-owned company. So it isn't just our employees who care because it's their job to care. These employees care because this is their company too. And our clients belong to them as much as they belong to anybody else. And I think that really comes through in the way that we approach helping our clients out.
It's an amazing time. I'm sure when 2020 started, the direction your business has taken over the last, 8 to 9 months is not where you expected it to be going.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we were prepared to have a whole bunch of conversations around how to take the next level of AI and automation and some of the really exciting things that's happening in the machine learning space and apply it to our companies or our clients. And that was really our focus for 2020. Instead, we have shifted to working remotely and security. And those are the fundamental conversations that we need to have right now. And a lot of that starts to open up bigger conversations about what a client's footprint should be in terms of how much should be in the cloud, how much should be on premise, how many desks they're going to have in their office, where their employees are going to live, where they're going to work, what technology they're going to use to do that work. That opens up a whole can of worms of really important, but also really exciting conversations, because I think a lot of businesses didn't think that they could have these conversations, didn't think that their business could operate. And now that they know it can, they're suddenly excited to talk about what else is possible and how far can we go and what can we really do with this opportunity to change the way we do business and to change our cost structure and delivery model and everything else.
It is an exciting time. It really is. When you think of the potential of what's out there, in many ways, it just seems like we're just scratching the surface.
Not only are we scratching the surface of what's possible from a technology standpoint, it's also an exciting time for people to get into the technology space and to be a technologist and to be in that working environment. And one of the things that we work really closely with is an organization called Tech Foundry. And what they do is they bring disadvantaged populations into the technology working space, where they help people who are either minorities or maybe just female diversity, but also looking at things like socioeconomic background, looking at all the things that don't exist in most IT spaces, trying to help those people enter the space. And it's a really exciting time to be able to not only work with all the new people coming in and entering the market, but also being able to work with organizations that promote that and are trying to create a much more diverse workforce in this space that has predominantly been very non-diverse.
And that's wonderful. Actually, you must have read my mind, because that was where I was moving into as far as the Tech Foundry is concerned. That this is all of our futures, and I guess we all need to get a handle on it, no matter what our age and what our background, because it's becoming more and more a part of our lives.
Yeah, and when we started that program, the original thought process would be training mostly kids right out of high school who maybe didn't go to college, or they dropped out of college, or they were still going to community college. The reality is, though, the students who go through that program are as old as 67 years old. It's retired truck drivers who realize that their trucks are going to become autonomous. It's librarians who realize their libraries are being closed down. It's a lot of individuals who realize that the career that they've been in, maybe for 20 or 30 years, isn't going to exist between now and their retirement date. And they need to reinvent themselves and reinvest in themselves to reskill themselves to be able to operate in today's workforce.
Let's talk about folks, small business out there saying, okay, I'm having all sorts of problems setting my IT system up. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the best way is to go to our website and contact us. There's a lot of good information there. We want to make sure that we're the right fit. And if a business is ever not the right fit, we're also really happy to help them find that right fit. Choosing an IT provider, it's very similar to choosing an accountant or a lawyer. You really need to get the right fit. And it isn't always about price. It isn't always about size. It's really about understanding who the business is, who the business decision makers are, and what their viewpoint and approach to technology, but also how they use technology and what industry they're in. We think about all of those things before we decide whether a client could be a good fit for us. And if they're not, we always recommend them to somebody who we know is.
And as a company now, this has got to be part of your business plan, doesn't it? I mean, money has to be set aside to do this, because it's as important as somebody walking in the door and face-to-face contact.
Oh, it's got to be a significant part of not only your budget, but also a significant part of your strategy and your goals and your plans. You really need to think about, how do I leverage technology to make my business better? How can it make my more efficient? How can it improve my bottom line? How can I better serve my customers? If you think about some of your best experiences, oftentimes they're technology-enabled experiences where something happened automatically without you having to do anything, or you didn't have to fill out 16 paper forms and scan them in and email them. Those kinds of improvements that can really change your customers can give you a competitive edge. Or worse, if your competitors are already doing it, it's going to be the reason that your clients and customers move to your competitors. And so it's got to be not just an investment at the operational level. It really has to be part of the strategic conversation about, where should we be investing in technology? Where are we behind the curve? Where could we improve? And even starting to get to things like, where might we be able to leverage things like AI and machine learning and just automation in general to save time, save money, be more competitive, be more efficient? And those are the conversations that CEOs need to be having about their businesses.
I enjoyed our conversation for sure. Just listening to you, the enthusiasm that you have for what you do and for helping others will spill over, and I'm sure down the line for any company associated with you is going to make things successful.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate your time today as well. It's been great talking to you. And I hope that's true. And like I said, I think it's true of every single person that works here. We absolutely love what we do. We call our core purpose to make IT fun. And we feel like if we can make IT fun for the small businesses that we help, they're going to be more successful. We're going to be more successful. And the Western Massachusetts community is going to be more successful.
My thanks to Delcie Bean for taking time from his very busy schedule to be my guest on this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. To learn more about his company and their services, you can go to their website. It's paragusit.com. I'm Dave Madsen. Thanks for watching or listening to the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Stay safe, stay well, and if you can, join me next week.